promise of liberation from hard labor, but soon turned into yet another addiction. Is technology giving humanity more than it's taking from it? Well, to discuss that, I'm now joined by a co-founder of Apple and a godlike figure in the IT world, Steve Wozniak. Mr. Wozniak, thank you very much for being on the show. I know that you describe yourself as an agnostic or an atheist, but it seems wherever you go, you are being worshipped. How does it feel?
You know what? I am so glad that technology has gone so far, has changed our life so much that people actually feel a kind of a love and a club, and they look for a symbol to worship. And I'm an accidental symbol. I was just, you know, a lucky great engineer at one time.
Well, I don't think it's so accidental. And speaking about Apple and worshiping, I think Apple was one of the first companies to really put man and human experience in the center of the design. The company really tried to create gadgets that would be the extension of human skills, human capacity. It's very comfortable, obviously, but on the other hand, isn't there a danger that we will lose our ability to innovate? Because you know, it's been said many times that necessity and maybe even frustration is the mother of invention.
If I get that right, it's like everything is being done for us so well that, oh my gosh.
We're becoming more lazy in a sense.
Yes, becoming lazier, and we don't have to think, we don't have to innovate. I disagree, because all of the factors that are making it possible for our products to do these things, it feels like, wow, I used to have to work and I used to have to think hard. Those still need thinking to get developed. So hey, at least become one of the developers. You know, and Apple's always had this mission to make things that are easier for the human, put the human first. And that means saving us exercise from physical labor, saving us from mental labor, saving us from thinking hard. And I really like it. I enjoy it. I think I'm getting a lot more use out of my products when I just sort of speak naturally to them and get done what I want to do. Will it get worse than it is today? Are we on a trend towards devices doing so much for us? It's like we only make a few little important decisions in our life, you know, and then we fill up the rest of the time with communication. I don't know, that's a question, but you can't stop it, so why worry about it?
Well, but if you look at your own legendary history with the Apple I and Apple II, I know that you said on several occasions that one of the reasons you've been able to come up with this very attractive product is because of the shortage of money. You had to innovate, you had to think about how to create it on a shoestring budget, and now it seems, well, I don't know, if everything was delivered to you on a golden plate, do you think you would still have a motivation, you know, to go ahead and do it?
You know what, look at some more recent innovations. Okay, the movie The Social Network on Facebook. And Facebook came out of the same origins as Apple. You know, very little money and an idea that people started recognizing, you know, was popular and desired by people. And those ideas keep coming up, and they come up more in the app world area. And look at how much apps cost for smartphones. They cost $0 or $1 or $2 or $3. So they're very much still forced by the fact there isn't going to be a lot of revenue. We're just going to do it from our heart. And a lot of innovation comes out there. A lot of them turn out to be successful when people didn't expect. That doesn't mean it's the average is you're going to make a lot of money with apps, but that world's very open. Could I make an entire computer platform today? Anybody sits back. See, I was very lucky. I was one human being who could build the whole computer, the hardware and the software, and building it and doing the whole thing. Today, it's so many millions of bits of code, you have to take what's already been done before, piece it together, and do what other people are doing, and then you have to manufacture, and you just can't compete with the big companies in the same area now. That's why the area of competition has shifted to how we live our life and how these tools can be used to affect our lives.
Now, speaking about necessity being the mother of invention, you just opened a conference here in Moscow that focuses on how to make the IT sector a new locomotive of growth for Russia. And there's been a discussion about that for the last, I guess, 7 years or maybe even longer. But the problem is, of course, that almost half of Russia's revenue still come from oil and gas, which are relatively easy to produce and are easier to sell. Do you think it's still even reasonable to talk about creating a new Silicon Valley here in Russia? Isn't that too little too late, given how far the technologies have progressed so far?
I think it's very reasonable. I think especially here in Russia, you know what? I drive around Moscow and I see plaques on a lot of buildings that are pointed out to me honoring dancers and engineers and artists and the creative people. And I think there's, in the culture of this country, is a lot of appreciation for those who have been creative and those who have created new things. I've already seen products even today here in Russia that are just outstanding products of the world. So when it comes from the mind, no mines anywhere in the world are better than any other mines. This idea, can we be another Silicon Valley? It takes a time to build up a critical mass, to have more and more and more and more technology companies. But I think it is a good, proper direction for all countries that depend today on natural resources, you know, like Russia does. So it's the right step. Why would you think that couldn't be done here, couldn't compete? A lot of thinking has to be done more about the psychology than the actual knowledge of engineering and products. Psychology, what motivates people? What motivates entrepreneurs and innovators? How do you take advantage of somebody who has a lot of ideas? What sort of resources should you help them with? Not huge amounts of money to build a company, I would pretend, but maybe little amounts of money to buy little products and use tools as they need to get their dreams created.
Well, let me pick up on that. You are somebody who definitely built things from scratch. What do you think about the idea of subsidies for inventors and creators?
I've never heard of it being done, but I'm totally for it. And one of the things is, when I worked for Hewlett-Packard, designing all the Apple stuff, they had a policy in the company that was written, and it said that an inventor could, an engineer could have parts out of his storeroom, chips and things like that, for devices of his own design with supervisor approval. Well, you know what? To borrow a few dollars worth of chips and build something up, even for yourself, for your home, is increasing your mind in a way that you couldn't get the same sort of learning from a university course, and it would cost a lot more.
I wonder if you could give your Russian colleagues and friends a tip. And I know that back in, I think it was in the 80s, maybe in the 1984 interview, that you said that every decade we have a new industry being created from scratch that grows very dramatically, and we certainly saw that with the personal computers and phones and later social networks. I wonder, what do you think is going to be the next big breakthrough? Do you have any ideas on that?
I'm actually with what everybody is talking about, which is wearable technology, but I'm also thinking that the speech recognition and speech understanding, that's artificial intelligence stuff. We've never really gotten close to penetrating or understanding how the real brain works. So I think that if we keep taking steps in that direction, we're going to stumble on the clues by accident. I want a machine that talks to me like you're talking to me and understands my words the way you are and looks at my face and understands my life and even knows things about my family, what's important to me that we're not even talking about. I want that personal friend in a machine, and it might take a long time. You know, it might take us 20 years to get to that point, 30 years.
But many people say that technology is making us a bunch of lonely people, you know, like it substitutes the value of real connection. If something like that is being developed, isn't there a danger that we will become essentially encapsulated within our own little semi-technological world?
That's what we say only because we fear that change, that something different is worse than what we had before. Things that meant a lot emotionally and were beautiful in our lives can go away. That doesn't mean that the new person doesn't have those emotions in a different sense. I watch my own kids go into a room and all day long in the room on a computer and thinking, whoa, they're just away from the world. I have a newspaper, they don't know things in the world. They knew more than I did, it turned out. Also, I thought of myself. I was a very shy person. You know, and shy people, it's very difficult to go out in society. You're afraid of people. You don't want to ever talk to people. You walk in routes that avoid ever having to bump in and say a word to another person. But online, you're unknown. It's like you can open up and all of a sudden have a world of friends no matter how shy you are. So it has actually helped a lot in that social regard.
Mm-hmm. But I heard you saying that you have, on Facebook, you have 2,000, maybe even more now, friends, people that you don't really know. So is it the same as having real friends?
The problem is I'm so soft I won't be a hard person. And if somebody says something nice, very nice to me, good comments about how much I've been in their life or Apple has, yes, okay, you can be a friend. I can't turn you down when you're that way, you know, or if you send me a picture of a couple, I believe in true love, and, you know, I see it there, okay, you're in as a friend. I don't know them. The trouble is, I also will never shut off my email. So every Facebook message comes to me, and I read it, and yeah, it's a huge amount of time and a huge amount of my life goes into that. But hey, you know what? A lot of benefits have come out. I've met some really great people that I kind of moved from the category of fans into friends. So I make more friends every year, like real friends that I kind of stay in touch with more than ever I could have imagined.
You mentioned your kids and how savvy they are with technology, but there are a lot of studies, especially in the United States, showing that, you know, this new generation on average has less friends than people of your generation had. Do you think that's partly related to technology and the way we relate to the surrounding world?
I'm guessing that you're probably referring to some study that it was less close friends that you really dealt with all the time, because when you have a lot of friends, they tend to get diluted and spread out. Distribution of responsibility, and maybe that's just the future. The total sum is probably more important than anything. For example, you always talk about brainstorming. I have a problem. If 100 friends hear it, you know, and all will jump in and help you right away, you'll probably get a solution more likely than one or two that you trust for an answer.
Now, you, at this particular point of time, you are the most famous American in Moscow, but there's one more American here who is also relatively famous and has a similar background to you. He is a computer wizard of sorts, and I'm talking obviously about Edward Snowden. And you know that some Americans believe he is a hero, others believe he's a criminal. Where do you stand?
I believe he's a hero. I believe he's coming directly from his heart, that he feels some goodness, that he wants to be truthful to the American people, that he believes in and loves his country, America, so strongly. And that's all true, and that he took a very drastic step and made a sacrifice. And I wish that I look around, is there anything in my life that I could do equivalent to his, make the sacrifice? I would do it. I don't have knowledge, information to expose, you know, on government bad activities that they do secretly because nobody would really think it's the right thing. So I'm very glad that he exists among us. He's a hero, and I wish that someday, if I'm in the same situation, I hope that I have the courage to do the same thing.
Now, you know that Russia granted him a temporary political asylum, and when this issue was considered, the president of this country, Putin, was asked about Snowden, and his answer was very peculiar or curious to me. He actually said that he doesn't really understand people like that. You know, somebody who has a very technical mind, who is a very low profile, and yet somebody who would put his entire life on the line for his principles. Now, he doesn't understand people like that, but you probably have been with people like that all your life.
I believe
you may be one of them. Do you think we will see more techies taking up with governments around the world for the sake of values that they believe in?
I'm not sure that techies are that, let's say, liberal-minded, trying to do good for humans. I think a lot of them fall across the spectrum just like any type of people, so I don't think you can actually put it on a techie. I think Snowden could well have been just a humble assistant, maybe a janitor, you know, maybe a very important worker. I think could have been anywhere. I don't think it really matters that he is a techie, and I don't know exactly what his tech responsibilities are.
But I think people like that, they have a different philosophy of life, probably.
The thing is, there's something about truth being very important when you spend your whole life working in systems like engineering, in software, and your programs have to work. You come up with this very strong there is a logical connection, and you should follow the logic. The logic leads you to the right answer. It leads you to the objective answer, and you don't follow a bias. A bias would say, oh, I'm for my side, I'm for my country, I'm for my employer. No, you know what? I don't know. This whole thing about, you know, it's kind of Socratic, about just truth and getting it out. To me, the apex of all good in my life, I decided when I was 20 years old, is truth. And if people are hiding the truth, what they're doing is they think it's bad. And that applies to even the government. The trouble is, I thought that Putin, when I read all that, I thought that maybe he was realizing his government has the same sort of spying, even on civilians.
Well, we don't know the extent of spying, and it seems that many governments have similar programs. And one of the things that Edward Snowden revealed is that many of the big tech companies are actually sort of complicit in this spying activity. Isn't that surprising to you that people who started their business from scratch, who were maybe idealistic at a certain point of their lives would actually sort of cross the Rubicon and join the powers that be.
I think that some of the tech companies want to be there, and it's usually cell phone carriers. I think a lot of the other companies, like Apple and Google and more of the technology companies, I think they do not want to do that at all, and I think it was forced on them by the government under legal conditions that basically you'll be thrown into jail or something like that.
We have to take a short break now, but when we come back, Steve the inventor and Steve the business executive, how did they strike gold and why did they grow apart? That's coming up in a few moments on Worlds Apart. Welcome back to Worlds Apart, where we are discussing innovation and technology with the co-founder of Apple, Steve Wozniak. Mr. Wozniak, you've said many times that you always wanted to be an engineer, a person who creates things rather than manages people or finances. And I'm sure you would say that both you and Steve Jobs had equally important contributions to the success of Apple. But if you look around, for every brilliant engineer, we can find dozens, if not hundreds, brilliant managers. And I mean, brilliant engineers are harder to find. But at the same time, there is a Hollywood blockbuster about Steve Jobs with the character of Steve Wozniak playing a supporting role. Do you think we have our priorities right in terms of the social and business value of these two fields, engineering versus marketing and sales?
I don't. Sometimes I do and sometimes I don't. Marketing and sales is very important. It might be a tougher job to get people to accept the word computer in their home than it was for me to create it. Now, I go back and look at my engineering. It was so different than anything you could ever find in a book. Yes, that kind of engineer is very, very difficult, very hard to find, and the Apple II was recognized by all my friends. It was going to be a huge hit product. It was the product that brought all the revenues to Apple Computer for the first 10 years, but it didn't do it alone without the marketing and the business genius, of largely people above Steve Jobs who were teaching him. But Steve's push and his speaking, being a face of the company, was equally important in really making that product successful. I think that a lot of people I see now being trained to have their business success, and they're being trained how to write all the documents to raise money and describe an idea they have, and they think that the idea has value, and they discredit. Sometimes they leave out, well, when I get the money, I'll go find some engineers. No, you should include the engineers in thinking out what the product is. They have been working their whole life with intense, deep thought and very quickly spotting when something can be done that other people hadn't thought of. So how do you find the really bright, creative engineers? It's difficult. I run into one once in a while, and I think this person is going to go somewhere and be one of the great inventors of all time, but it's very rare and hard to find into. They aren't recognized by things like they have a college degree and they have this many years experience. So no company really has a method to find them.
And I think for many young people and young men and increasingly young women, it is now a real choice which Steve to become, Steve the inventor or Steve the business executive. And it seems that popular culture at least favors the latter, and there are more benefits and less risks associated with this latter choice.
Yeah, I think you do what's in your heart. You know what? I went in my direction because it was in my heart. And when we started the company, I could have easily been one of the people running it. And I didn't want to. I didn't want to really be one of those people that says I'm more important than other people. That's one thing. I still, to this day, want to be at the bottom of the org chart. It's just how I am. So you know what? Use your brilliance. Use your brilliance in whatever way you can. And it's okay to make money. And it's okay to run a company too. It's okay to have some involvement in the business side.
In one of your previous interviews and during this conference, you were a bit critical of this latest Ashton Kutcher feature film about Steve Jobs, and you criticized it for sort of over-glorification of Steve Jobs and giving him all the credit. And I would argue that this is a part of much larger trend. Humanity likes to create idols and maybe a cult of personality, not just about tech gurus, but also about movie stars, sometimes country leaders and so on. And in the beginning of this tech revolution, there was a real belief that technology and the internet would make our world more democratized, more equalized. Do you still believe that? Do you believe that it is actually making this world a bit more equal place when it comes to people from different countries, from different backgrounds, and so on?
You said a lot in one thing. So the look, for heroes and icons like Steve Jobs, he's well deserving of it. That has nothing to do with why the movie was totally rotten and trash, and it didn't even bring out the greatness, the real Steve Jobs. That was the problem. As far as internet democratizing things, I think it has done the biggest job ever in the world. Almost everywhere that we get answers now that we used to carry books and books that didn't have its complete answers. We used to be around smart people and ask them questions. For a while we could load in CDs of encyclopedias. We had methods in the past that all of a sudden anywhere in the world we can get answers. And when I get answers online, the person that's sending me the answers might be in Pakistan or Oman or all over the place. I'm very shocked at how that is. So yeah, it has. We haven't really cut that off yet. There is a danger that the internet has become a tool of governments to control us and watch us and monitor us more, and not let us go out of the path.
I would like to pick up on this point. I find it extremely ironic that in English the word intelligence has two increasingly divergent meanings. On one hand, it's sort of a capacity for learning. On the other hand, it's all about secretive info-gathering activities by the government. And the first one is all about freedom of thought. The second one, the latter one, is all about command and control. And I wonder which form of intelligence would prevail, because technology can enable both of them.
I like the way you phrase that. Although I thought when you started, intelligence actually, you said it has two definitions. I thought you were going to say it has one that schools tell us that always being able to answer questions on tests correctly, meaning you have the same answer as everyone else, and it's not your own answer. It came out of a book. That's called intelligence. You're taught your whole life. That is intelligence. Now, people who go wandering off making products that never existed, computers and electronics and things to control the home, these people are not, those products, a lot of stuff that I did for Apple Computer would get me an F in a school course, wouldn't be allowed in a company. It isn't, thinking for yourself is the real intelligence, but it's not what schools call intelligence with their numbers, their measurements and the tests. Now, as far as acquiring information about the world intelligence, I actually think that's important, and it can be used for good or bad. It's who uses it and how they use it.
Now, one of your last encounters with Steve Jobs was at a conference back in 2006, and you hugged each other, you exchanged some formal phrases, you promised to catch up later. And maybe it's just me, but I think that encounter had a very sad feeling, because, we know about both of you being this great technological duo, but you can see from that footage that you were no longer good friends. Now, given how much time you spent in the beginning of your career, why did you grow apart? Was it because of money, power, evolving personalities? What happened?
Well, you only have a certain number of close friends in your life, and Steve and I were closest of friends for 5 years leading to the starting of Apple. But your close friends are ones that are doing the same things as you. When we started Apple, his personality was changing into the Steve Jobs that would be forever. And he was going to be high up leader of a company, having the say in running things, being very important, and being at that level of the company. Mine was, I wanted to be humble, and I wanted to do the greatest engineering and come up with ideas and things that other people in the world wouldn't even think of. And I kept doing that at Apple. Had quite a bit of impact on our early starting products. And that was, so we were in different parts of the company. It's like Steve wanted the glory alone too, and it didn't need me being there at the top. You couldn't have two people being the face of the company. So I think that was right. We each got what we wanted out of it. I was very happy. I wanted to be in the background. I didn't ever want to be even on television with you now. That was not my idea. It's just that people loved so much that came out of the company. And you got to give Steve Jobs an awful lot of the credit for espousing words and beliefs and things like the 1984 commercial that got people believing in what the company was about. So I actually benefit a lot of that. Now, we were not close friends, but you know what? Steve was respectful to me from day one. He would call me on the phone near the end of his life, and he would always he was thinking about those early days. And did we ever think what it could become? And I know that meant a lot to him, just those early friendship days.
Mm-hmm. Back in 2010, I believe, you made headlines by predicting that Android would be dominant over the iPhone market-wise, but it would remain on the sort of technological edge. Do you still believe that Android will take over the iPhone?
I think in terms of some kind of marketing figures, sales, and quantities of units, Android actually surpassed the iPhone. As far as overtaking it in people's minds, no. It's always been like the iPhone is the top product that you hear about. It's the special one, and there are a lot of ways that to explain why you know, maybe Android sell more, Samsung sells more smartphones than Apple does. Do they make more profit? Are they going to be the leaders, though, for the next type of product that comes along or not? We'll have to see. But I'm not going to disdain Android, because when it started out, it was not as good as an iPhone, but it grew up. And you know what? It had the mentality behind it, kind of like what we have in Apple that makes our products good. And the guy who was behind Android, Andy Rubin, a good friend of mine. I was on a company of his that made a smartphone. He worked at Apple, and he has the whole Macintosh mindset anyway of make things easy and obvious to people.
Now, some people believe that this whole world of applications that Apple created is more consequential than the gadgets themselves, because if you look around, for example, iTunes U, it totally changed my life. I can, get access to courses from the best universities from my own home for free, so it's revolutionizing higher education, at least, and I know that you are very passionate about education. What are your favorite apps, and which area do you think has the most potential for the development of application? I'm so short of time these days. My favorite apps are usually, like Siri is definitely my favorite app on the iPhone. I got to say that. And then if I went through a whole day and showed you all the different apps I use at different times, it'll vary day to day, and I can't say any one of them was any more important than each other, except, Siri. I mean, I'd say Siri is even more important than making phone calls. Would you like it to be improved? I mean, is there a potential to develop it?
Oh my gosh, hugely. Because very often I get frustrated when I speak it and then I change my words and I speak it more clearly, and it gets my words right, but it doesn't understand what I meant. And I want to teach it. But that's software and that's programming, and you got to give it time. Just like some of our early computers didn't sell very well at first, but then given enough years, we can still make a market out of them.
Steve Wozniak, thank you very much for your time. And if you like the show, please join us again, same place, same time, here on Worlds Apart.